There is a dead man on a beach in Australia. He is well dressed. He is clean shaven. His shoes are polished. And nobody on earth knows who he is. That sentence was true on the morning of the 1st of December, 1948. It remained true for 73 years. And depending on who you ask, it is still not entirely settled today. Welcome to Hushed History, and I want you to find a place where you can fully relax and let the outside world fade away into the background as you get comfortable for the story I am about to share with you tonight. Because this one has layers. Every time investigators thought they had reached the bottom of it, the ground shifted beneath them. And when modern science finally arrived with the tools to peel back the last layer, what it revealed was not the dramatic answer the world had spent decades expecting. It was something far quieter, and in its own way far more haunting. Let us begin at the beginning. At approximately 6:30 in the morning on the 1st of December, 1948, two amateur jockeys exercising their horses along the sand of Somerton Beach on the southern outskirts of Adelaide, South Australia, came across a man lying against a concrete seawall at the top of the beach. His legs were outstretched. His feet were crossed at the ankle. His head rested back against the wall. He was wearing a brown double-breasted suit, a white shirt with a red and blue tie, and brown shoes that had been polished to a shine. He was not moving. The jockeys assumed he was sleeping off the previous night and rode on. When other beachgoers found him in the same position later that morning, the police were called. He was dead. The first strange thing was this. There was no obvious cause, no wound, no bruising, no sign of a struggle of any kind. He appeared to the first officers on the scene to simply be a man who had sat down, crossed his feet, and ceased to exist. The second strange thing became apparent when they went through his pockets. He had a used bus ticket from the city of Adelaide. He had an unused second-class train ticket to a nearby beach called Henley Beach. He had a packet of chewing gum. He had cigarettes and matches. He had an aluminium comb made in the United States. He did not have a wallet. He did not have any form of identification. And every single label had been carefully cut from every item of clothing he was wearing. Not just the brand labels, every label. The labels that might have told investigators where the clothes were bought, where they were made, and most critically, who they belonged to. All of them were gone. Someone had removed them deliberately with patience and precision before this man ever reached that beach. The autopsy, conducted 9 days later by pathologist John Barclay Dwyer, led investigators deeper into confusion rather than out of it. The man was between 40 and 45 years old. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall, well built, and physically fit. His calf muscles were described as unusually developed, the kind found in a dancer or a man who spent years doing strenuous physical work on his feet. His toenails were clean and carefully attended to. His heart showed no signs of disease. He should, by every measurable standard, have been healthy, and yet he was dead. Dwyer found that the man's internal organs were severely congested with blood. His spleen was 3 times its normal size. His stomach contained traces of what may have been blood. And the toxicology tests, which checked for cyanide, lead, alkaloids, barbiturates, carbolic acid, and every other known poison available to forensic science at the time came back completely clean. Nothing. No identifiable cause of death. The coroner's inquest, concluded in June of 1949, listed the cause of death as unknown. 3 medical witnesses testified that the death was not natural. The government chemical analyst who examined samples from the body said, and I want you to hear this exact phrasing because it has echoed through this case for 3/4 of a century, that he believed the immediate cause was heart failure, but he was unable to say what factor had caused the heart to fail. His fingerprints were circulated nationally and internationally. His photograph was published in newspapers across Australia. His dental records were checked against every available database. The FBI in the United States checked their own files and wrote back to confirm there was no match. Dozens of people came to view the embalmed body in the months that followed, hoping to recognize a missing person. Not one of them could. He was buried in Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery beneath a headstone that reads, "Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach 1 December 1948. And the world might have slowly forgotten him, except for one thing. Several weeks after the body was found, staff at Adelaide Railway Station located a brown suitcase in the luggage cloakroom. It had been checked in at 11 in the morning on the 30th of November, the day before the body was discovered. The label on the suitcase had been removed before it was checked in. Inside were pajamas, slippers, a dressing gown, shaving equipment, and various personal items. Some of the clothing was marked with a name, Tamám Shud. Police searched for anyone by that name who was missing. They found nothing. But the suitcase was not the most significant development in the case. That came in the weeks surrounding the inquest, 7 months after the body was found. Investigators had been searching for the source of a small scrap of paper discovered in a tiny fob pocket sewn inside the man's trousers. A hidden pocket. The kind most people do not even know exists. Inside it, tightly rolled, was a slip of paper torn from the final page of a book. On it, printed in elegant type, were 2 words in Persian: Tamám Shud. It translates as "it is finished" or "the end." Police appealed publicly for anyone who could identify the source of the scrap. A man eventually came forward. He said he had found a rare edition of a book of Persian poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, lying on the floor of his car. His car had been parked unlocked near Somerton Beach on the 30th of November, the night before the body was found. He had not known how it got there. When police examined the book, they confirmed that the torn scrap matched the missing page exactly. It had come from this book. But when Detective Sergeant Lionel Lean looked more carefully at the back cover of that book, holding it at an angle, tilting it beneath a lamp, he noticed something. Faint indentations in the cardboard. As though someone had written on a piece of paper placed on top of the cover, pressed hard enough to leave impressions in the surface below, and then removed the paper. The writing itself was gone, but the ghost of it remained pressed into the card like a scar. Police brought in forensic lighting equipment. Under ultraviolet light, those indentations came alive. 5 lines of capital letters emerged from the surface of. The back cover characters that had been invisible to the naked eye, impossible to read in ordinary light, requiring a specialist lamp just to confirm they existed. Let that sit for a moment. This man had either written something on a piece of paper resting on this book, or someone else had. Either way, whoever wrote it had not intended for it to be easily seen. And yet there it was, hidden in plain sight on the back of a poetry book found in a stranger's unlocked car. 5 lines, all capital letters, 1 line crossed out. The first 3 lines separated from the last 2 by a pair of straight lines with an X drawn across them. no spaces between the characters, no obvious pattern. Investigators sent the sequence to the Office of Naval Intelligence. They could not crack it. The sequence was eventually published in the press, and amateur codebreakers across Australia and then around the world attempted to decipher it. Nobody succeeded. It has now been examined for more than 70 years by cryptographers, military analysts, intelligence agencies, linguists, and some of the most dedicated amateur investigators in Australian history. It remains unbroken. But the book also contained something else. Below the indented letters in faint pencil was a phone number, an unlisted number. Police traced it. It belonged to a woman living in Somerton, a nurse. Her name was Jessica Thompson, though she had previously gone by her maiden name, Jessica Harkness. She lived 400 meters from where the body had been found. When police showed her a plaster cast made of the dead man's face, multiple witnesses present described her reaction as though she had been physically struck, visibly shaken, almost to the point of fainting. She said she had never met him. She maintained that position for the rest of her life. She died in 2005, and whatever she truly knew died with her. Her daughter, Kate, told a television program in 2014 that her mother had confided she did know the Somerton Man's identity, and that it was a matter kept at a level higher than the local police force. Jessica Thompson had also, during the Second World War, given a copy of the same poetry book to a man she had known in Sydney, an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall. Police tracked him down, convinced they had found the Somerton Man. Boxall was alive. He still had the book she had given him, with her handwritten inscription inside the front cover. It was not the same book. The trail went cold again. This is the point at which the spy theories took hold and never entirely let go. 1948 was a year of profound Cold War tension. Adelaide was home to significant military and scientific infrastructure. The UV revealed code, the untraceable death, the erased labels, the nurse who lived 400 meters from the body and denied knowing it, the phone number hidden in pencil beneath an invisible inscription, all of it stacked together pointed toward a narrative of espionage. Of a Soviet operative or intelligence asset who had been silenced cleanly and professionally before he could speak. It was a compelling story. It was almost certainly wrong. Because in 2022, a man named Derek Abbott announced that he had a name. Abbott was a professor of electronic engineering at the University of Adelaide. He had first encountered the case in 1995, reading a magazine in a laundromat. He set it aside. In 2007, he read about it again. This time, it took hold of him and did not let go. He spent years campaigning for the body to be exhumed so that DNA could be extracted. In 2021, South Australia police finally agreed. The remains were dug up from West Terrace Cemetery. But it was not the exhumed remains that cracked the case. It was something far older and far simpler. When the dead man's body was first found in 1948, Adelaide police had made a plaster cast of his head and shoulders, a death mask, standard procedure at the time. When the cast had been made, strands of the man's hair had become embedded in the plaster. They stayed there for over 50 years. Pressed into the cast in a storage facility, completely overlooked, waiting for technology that did not yet exist. Abbott had obtained those hairs years earlier, having been given access to them by South Australia police. But extracting viable DNA from rootless hair strands, just the shafts, with no follicle, is one of the most technically demanding tasks in forensic science. The attempts failed. Year after year, the attempts failed. But the technology kept advancing. By early 2022, Abbott's team, working alongside American forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick, had finally extracted enough usable genetic material from those strands to do something with it. They uploaded the profile to a genealogical database called GEDmatch, which holds DNA contributed voluntarily by people around the world tracing their ancestry. A match came back. A distant cousin on the dead man's father's side. Abbott and Fitzpatrick built a family tree outward from that single match. They constructed it person by person using birth certificates, marriage records, death notices, newspaper archives, and historical documents stretching back across a century. The tree eventually held 4,000 people. And within that tree, they were looking for a very specific individual. Someone who fitted the known profile of the Somerton Man, the right age, the right era, the right geography, and who had no recorded date of death. Someone who had simply vanished from the historical record. In that tree of 4,000 people, there were only 2 individuals with no date of death on record. One of them was a man named Carl Webb. Born on the 16th of November, 1905, in Footscray, a suburb of Melbourne, the youngest of 6 children. His father was of German descent. His mother was Australian. He grew up to become an electrical engineer and instrument maker. He was, by all accounts, a loner. He was known to enjoy poetry. In October 1941, he married a woman named Dorothy Jean Robertson. The marriage was not a happy one. Divorce records Abbott later obtained describe a troubled relationship that by January 1946 had led Carl to tell his wife he wanted to separate. In April 1947, he left. And after that, nothing. No employment record. No address. No mention in any document, newspaper, court filing, or public register of any kind. As Abbott put it, it is like he just fell off the radar. The last confirmed trace of Carl Charles Webb in any historical record is April 1947. He died, if it was him, on the 30th of November 1948 on or near Somerton Beach. His wife Dorothy, who had since moved to a town called Butte in South Australia, 89 miles northeast of Adelaide, placed a notice in the Melbourne Age newspaper in October 1951. It was addressed to Carl Webb, formerly of Bromby Street, South Yarra, but now of parts unknown. It informed him that she had begun divorce proceedings on the grounds of desertion, and that if he did not appear before the Supreme Court by the 29th of October, the case would proceed without him. He did not appear. The divorce went through. Nobody at any point connected the man in the newspaper notice to the man buried in West Terrace Cemetery. Now, the pieces Abbott and Fitzpatrick assembled around the identification of Carl Webb do more than simply give the Somerton Man a name. They quietly dismantle the spy narrative that had gathered around him for decades. The clothes in the suitcase marked T. Keen. Carl Webb's brother-in-law was a man named Thomas Keene, who lived 20 minutes from the Webb family home in Victoria. Abbott's conclusion: the dead man had been wearing his brother-in-law's hand-me-down clothing. Not a cover story. Not a fabricated identity. Just a man in borrowed clothes. The reason Abbott believes Webb was in Adelaide at all: his estranged wife had moved there. Abbott's theory is that Carl Webb knew Dorothy had relocated to South Australia and that he had traveled the 700 kilometers from Melbourne specifically to find her. The unused train ticket to Henley Beach, the bus ticket from the city, a man moving through a city where his estranged wife now lived, apparently not finding her, or finding her and being turned away. And then sitting down against a seawall as the sun went down on the 30th of November, watching the water and not getting up again. As for the code in the back of the rubaiyat, Abbott has stated plainly that he does not believe it is a spy cipher. His view is that it is more likely personal shorthand, perhaps a memory aid for a poem, or initials from a betting slip if the man was a gambler, which some records suggest. Something private rather than operationally classified. The connection to Jessica Thompson, the nurse, the phone number in the book, the reaction to the death mask, remains genuinely unresolved and may never be settled. The DNA does not match the descendants of Thompson's son, which had previously been proposed as a link between the two. Whatever the relationship between those two people was, if there was one at all, it lies beyond what the evidence currently supports. What the DNA does support, with 99.9% confidence according to Abbott and Fitzpatrick, is the identity of the man himself. Carl Charles Webb, 43 years old, electrical engineer, reader of poetry, a bit of a loner. No one looking for him. No one who came forward when his face was in the newspapers. Here is what makes this case impossible to fully set down and walk away from. South Australia police have not, as of the time this was researched, formally confirmed Abbott's findings. The forensic work on the exhumed remains was ongoing. The state coroner must assess the evidence before a formal identification can be declared. So, in the strict legal sense, the Somerton Man is still officially unidentified. Carl Webb remains the most thoroughly evidenced, most carefully constructed, most robustly supported theory. Ever advanced in this case, but not yet a confirmed fact. One filmmaker who had spent years investigating the case, convinced the man must be European or a displaced person from the war, put it this way when the DNA findings were announced. She said she found it particularly tragic that he was Australian from Victoria and that he died, and apparently nobody noticed he was missing and nobody followed up with police. That sentence is the true heart of this entire case. Not the code, not the spy theories, not the hidden inscription revealed only under a forensic lamp. The real question at the center of the Somerton Man is simpler and far harder to answer than any cipher. How does a man disappear so completely from the world that when his body is found on a public beach in a city his estranged wife has recently moved to, dressed in his brother-in-law's tie, not a single person on earth comes forward to say, "That is him"? How does a life reduced to 2 words torn from a poetry book, Tamám Shud, "It is finished," the end? Carl Webb, if it is Carl Webb, and the evidence says it is, went to that beach carrying the final page of a book about the fleeting and arbitrary nature of existence, written by a 12th century Persian poet whose central theme was the impossibility of knowing why we are here or what any of it means. And he left nothing else behind. No note, no name, no one who was looking for him. Just a man in a polished pair of shoes, legs outstretched, feet crossed at the ankle, facing the water. If tonight's story has stayed with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Hushed History. These are the stories that fall through the gaps of official history, the cases that never fully closed, the people that the record quietly forgot. We will keep bringing them to you. We will be here when you are ready for the next one.